The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agree to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones video. In this first video, I will be showing you what I believe are some of the greatest scenes from the very first season of the show. As you all know, Game of Thrones has given us a lot of amazing moments over the years. As a matter of fact, Game of Thrones delivered some of the most unforgettable moments in television history, like Ned Stark's execution, the Red Wedding, the Battle of the Bastards, and so much more. Now, it's no secret, almost all of these amazing scenes would happen at the end of the season. The show became famous for having the most shocking scenes in the 9th or 10th episode. What I want to do in these videos is show you what I believe is the best scene from each and every episode of Game of Thrones. I will start the series off by showing you some of those moments from Season 1. Hopefully you will follow along with me on the journey as we go through the whole show. Shall we begin? Season 1, Episode 1, Jaime Lannister throws Bran Stark out of the window. I would say this is without a doubt the most shocking scene in the first episode, but I also think it's the best scene in the episode for a number of different reasons.
The things I do for love.
This scene immediately showed us that Game of Thrones would be unlike almost every other show we've seen. Not only did we see some of the main characters engaging in an incestuous relationship, but we also saw one of them throw a child out of a window, knowing full well it would most likely lead to that child's death. Now, we all know Bran did survive the fall, but this was one hell of a way to end the first episode of a new show. By the end of that first episode, we knew there would be a lot of focus on House Stark. Not only were they given the first introduction as a family, but they were also given an introduction before the king himself. Then, at the end of this episode, we see that king's wife having an affair with her very own brother, a secret they would have to keep safe, otherwise Robert Baratheon would have all of them executed. So, when it was Bran Stark that discovered their secret, we knew Jaime wasn't throwing any child out of the window. This was the son of Ned Stark, the Warden of the North, and the future Hand of the King. He's not only one of the most respected men in all of the Seven Kingdoms, but he also just happens to be best friends with the king himself. Jaime Lannister throwing Bran Stark out of the window was one of those moments that indicated no one would be safe, not even in their very own home. Season 1, Episode 2, Ned Stark and Jon Snow say goodbye. Now I will be honest, selecting only one scene from this episode was much harder than I thought it would be. There were some scenes that had a lot of foreshadowing. There were some other scenes that were simply fun to watch, like when Jon gave Arya a needle, or when Arya and Nymeria beat up Joffrey. I mean, who doesn't like seeing Joffrey get humbled? We all do. But at the end of the day, there is no better scene in this episode for me than when Ned and Jon say goodbye, especially now that we know they will never see each other again.
Is my mother alive? Does she know about me, where I am, where I'm going? Does she care?
The next time we see each other, we'll talk about your mother.
Hindsight makes this scene even better because we now know exactly why Ned was safeguarding this secret about Jon Snow's mother. This is another reason why this scene is so sad. As you all know, this is when Jon begins asking Ned about his mother before he leaves. Jon wonders if his mother has any love for him at all. Unfortunately, he doesn't know that the reason why she hasn't been around is because she's dead already. You can see this shatters Ned's heart, because he almost starts crying before the scene is over. Jon has no idea that the last thing his mother ever did was make sure that Ned would keep him safe. Not only did Ned Stark lie to his wife about Jon's mother, but he also lied to his best friend, King Robert, who most likely would have had Jon killed if he ever found out he was Rhaegar's son. Jon might not have felt it whenever Lady Catelyn was around, but there was a lot of love for him at Winterfell. He just didn't know it. Season 1, Episode 3, Jaime Lannister and Ned Stark reminisce. This is actually one of my favorite scenes from all seasons. Now, we eventually see Jaime and Ned fight with their swords later in this season. However, I would argue this is a much better scene because the way they fight with their words here cut far deeper than any sword.
And later, when I watched the Mad King die, I remembered him laughing as your father burned. It felt like justice.
Is that what you tell yourself at night? You're a servant of justice.
The amount of information we are given in this scene alone is incredible. Not only do we find out what happened many years ago, but we are also given even more insight into who these characters are as men. Now, we will also eventually see Jaime Lannister go through a metamorphosis in later seasons, but in this moment, Ned Stark knows exactly what kind of man he is. Jaime is known throughout the Seven Kingdoms as one of the greatest swordsmen who ever lived, but in Ned's eyes, that's really only because he fights when fighting is safe. This is also when we find out exactly what happened to Ned's father and brother. Jaime, as well as 500 other men, stood there and watched as the Mad King had them burned alive. Ned must wonder why he didn't kill the Mad King then. Why did him and his father wait until the battle was basically won before they joined Robert's side? It's the Starks and the Lannisters' bitter relationship with one another that really drives this first season, and it was on full display in this scene. Season 1, Episode 4, Lady Stark and the Little Lion. If the Starks and the Lannisters' relationship wasn't bad enough, this really sent things over the edge. I can still remember the way I felt when Lady Catelyn had Lord Tyrion arrested during this scene.
In the name of King Robert and the good lords you serve, I call upon you to seize him and help me return him to Winterfell to await the king's justice.
Now, this moment was great in itself, but it also led to some of this season's other amazing moments, like Jaime Lannister fighting Ned Stark in the streets of King's Landing, Bran fighting for Tyrion during her first trial by combat, Lord Tywin Lannister's amazing introduction, and much more. None of those scenes would have happened the way that they did without this scene happening first. Now, we all know Lady Stark was arresting the wrong man, but I think this made the season far more interesting. There were some other great scenes in this episode, but this one affected the story immediately. You could also say this foreshadowed what was in store for Lord Tyrion Lannister, because as we all know, he would get arrested again and again. Season 1, Episode 5, The Battle of Varys and Littlefinger. Now, there were a lot of fun fight scenes in this episode. This is the episode where we get our first glimpse of Clegane Bowl when the Hound and his brother fought in front of a crowd of spectators. It's also the same episode when Jaime and Ned fought after his wife arrested his brother. As great as those moments are, I think the mental sparring Varys and Littlefinger do here is far more interesting, albeit maybe it's not as exciting.
But enough about me. How have you been since we last saw each other?
Since you last saw me, or since I last saw you?
Now, the last time I saw you, you were talking to the Hand of the King.
Saw me with your own eyes.
Eyes I own.
Watching these masterminds dance around each other's threats is fascinating, because although they may rarely get their hands dirty themselves, we all know how dangerous their information can be. With their little birds, they are essentially the eyes and ears of King's Landing. If one of these men don't know all of your secrets, you can almost guarantee the other one does. It really is a shame these characters only shared a few scenes. When they were still alive near the end of the series, I was really hoping we would see them face off against each other again. They were among some of the smartest characters in the show. It's unfortunate they were sidelined the way that they were in the later seasons. Watching this scene again really made me miss the Varys and Littlefinger of old. Season 1, Episode 6, Dany watches her brother burn. I mean, who doesn't love this scene? Watching Viserys die gave me more satisfaction than 1,000 lying whores. It's among some of the most satisfying death scenes on the show, only behind Joffrey's, Ramsay's, and Walder Frey's.
A crown for king.
The other reason why this scene is so great is because it also shows us Dany's dark side. This was a great example of what could or would happen if Daenerys ever reached a breaking point. Season 1, Episode 7, The Arrest of Ned Stark. Now this was not easy. There are so many other great scenes in this episode, I would argue it's one of the best episodes in the whole show. The very first scene is the introduction of Tywin Lannister, arguably the greatest introduction of any character. This scene right after that is when Cersei tells Ned, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. That's arguably one of the best lines in the show. This is the same episode when Jon Snow says his Night's Watch vows, and it's also the same episode where Robert Baratheon dies. If we would have actually seen Robert Baratheon die in a scene, I might have selected that one, because of how much it affected. But since we don't see that happen, I have to go with the next best thing, when Ned Stark is arrested. I don't know about all of you, but I was shocked the first time I saw Ned Stark get arrested, especially by that snake Littlefinger of all characters.
I did warn you not to trust me.
Now, as angry as I was, I cannot deny that it's one of the greatest moments in television history. I was expecting Ned to essentially seize the Iron Throne in that moment. It looked as if everything was set up for him to do just that. I remember thinking, finally, the Lannisters are about to be thrown out of King's Landing. But then to go from that high to seeing Ned Stark, one of the most beloved characters, get arrested is one hell of an emotional roller coaster. That single action by Cersei and Littlefinger effectively rearranged everything. Arya would run, Robb would fight, and unfortunately, Ned would die. In one way or another, the Lannisters would remain on the Iron Throne from this day until the very last day of Game of Thrones. Season 1, Episode 8. Down goes Dany and Drogo. When Khal Drogo rips out that man's throat, that is actually one of the very few moments George R.R. Martin said he wished he had written for himself. He'd love that Dan and Dave added that into the scene. Now, as fun as that is, that's not the only reason why I think this is one of the best scenes from this season. Who would have thought that such a little scratch would have had the impact that it did? In only the very last episode, Drogo announced that he would go to Westeros and wreak havoc on the Seven Kingdoms. I don't know about all of you, but I was really looking forward to seeing what would happen when Drogo and his men faced off against the Knights of Westeros. What made this thought even more exciting was the fact that Robert Baratheon was so afraid of this happening. He knew what the Dothraki would do if they ever made it on the shores of Westeros. But then, this little scratch stopped everything. This scene would result in not only the death of Khal Drogo, but his and Dany's unborn child as well. This even affected any future children Dany would have, because as we all know, she would never have another child of her own again. It really is amazing how these small moments are like butterfly effects that alter the direction of the show throughout the remaining seasons. Right when we thought Dany and Drogo were about to storm Westeros, she would not land on its soil until many seasons later. Season 1, Episode 9, The Death of Ned Stark. I didn't even have to think about this one. Ned Stark's death is one of the biggest moments in all 8 seasons. In fact, it's one of the most shocking moments in television history. This was without a doubt the moment every single fan knew no one was safe. Ned Stark was a main character who looked like he would one day take over the Iron Throne. He shouldn't die in the first season. Things like this don't happen very often in television or film. From this day moving forward, Game of Thrones was known as the show that would kill off any character, no matter how much they were loved. As a matter of fact, the more a character was loved, the more likely it seemed that they were going to die. Even still till this day, it's hard for me to watch that scene. The effect this had on Game of Thrones was immeasurable, and his death would be felt all the way up until the very end. Season 1, Episode 10, The Dragons Are Born. This is, without a doubt, one of the most significant moments in all of Game of Thrones. Once again, everything was about to change after the introduction of Dany's dragons.
Drogo will have no use for dragon eggs in the Nightlands. Sell them. You can return to the free cities and live as a wealthy woman for all your days.
They were not given to me to sell.
It was now only a matter of time before they made their mark on the realm. The dragons would wipe out cities, burn the dead, and even knock down the wall that stood for over 8,000 years. Dany most likely would have never survived as long as she did without her dragons, but in the end, they would be her downfall as well. Dany hatching her dragon eggs was one of the most magical moments in Game of Thrones, but I wonder if she would still think it was worth it after knowing where they would ultimately lead her. Leave me some of your thoughts down below. Let me know why you agree or disagree with some of the scenes on the list. I will do the scenes for the second episode in my very next video. Hopefully you will join me on this journey as I go through each and every episode from Game of Thrones. If not, I want to thank all of you anyway for watching my video. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.